supposed to start.
That's about it.
Once a Baptist boarding school,
Sarah, my
now
wife's
a
taking a
university.
college tour, taking some kids on a college
and
tour down to
now
Wilmington.
Gardner Webb
And I said, well,
leads our
each
community
time you'll get,
to come to the crossroads
really?
of
that place.
opportunity,
I remember looking at it, and
a place for friends
no, he
and
didn't, but
God.
I had circled it in here. I don't know if I after I edited it or what, but
Okay.
Talk about our town. For when the water flows,
because there was that one, and then there was
people gathered round.
Sarah Thomas, you contact Sarah Thomas too.
so I don't know if
Okay.
I just didn't go back and do it,
Our town,
copy or what.
All right.
926.
Orleans Spring, that's our town.
Perfect.
Yeah, if they're down there and
Welcome to our town.
we get down to see the baby otters.
Okay.
It's a neat place.
And different things. So.
I haven't
You been
down to
there?
the aquarium. I haven't been to the aquarium. I've been to Fort Fisher, but I haven't been to the
Oh,
aquarium.
yeah, it's
they
neat.
got-
It's neat.
Yeah, and
Lot of nice stuff there.
she can try to help them out. So,
Okay.
You know, because tickets are like $8, but that's still $8.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Mark.
Yeah.
Do we need to
It's funny,
dial in or
'cause-
anything?
She had a state in. That was supposed to be for
Right,
your wife.
right.
And I was like, well,
I know it. Are you there?
send it. Because it's with the-
Many, many years ago, from the ground below
Yeah.
to mighty
Well, you know, the
springs,
first female NFL referee was
how
named Sarah
they
Thomas.
ebb.
She got a big kick out of it.
Yeah.
Krista, can you hear me?
Oh, they're looking to vote. No, that's not. Let's do it. Come on in. You can sit wherever you want, gentlemen.
These your state.
Yeah. Couple of jokers is what they are.
Well, when's that? When is that take?
He told me he was going to.
Mayor.
It's November.
A lot of people been trying to find out where to vote.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Gentleman stopped me outside and said, "Are you coming to vote?"
Was letting me know.
All day long.
We can do it.
Sign.
Oh.
Yeah.
Here's your sign.
Seriously, there's
Should have had a flash.
seriously there's. I mean, there's been a lot of confusion. And
Yeah, I just don't
the
know
other-
how that.
I was down earlier, and
did.
another issue was, people, during early voting, it doesn't matter what precinct, you could vote here. But today, there were people going to the church to vote, and they're telling them, you gotta go to Lattimore, you can't vote here. Because, they thought, well, I voted, so-and-so voted there. I said, well, they voted early.
All right, I will call at 6:30, I'll call the November Boiling Springs Town Council meeting to order. Our first item of business is adoption of the agenda. If council's had a chance to look at it, are there any amendments?
I'll motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
All right, Mr. Edwards, the motion, is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Green, I believe, with the second. All those in favor can vote on your screens.
Oh, goodness.
All right, that is adopted unanimously. Are there any citizens present that would like to speak that are not listed on the agenda for any item that's not on the agenda? All right. I would like to welcome Mr. Bryson Morrison and Mr. Seth Knipe, a couple of my scholars from my civics class, so I think they're looking for extra credit, but welcome, gentlemen. Next item is the consent agenda, which we began last month, and this just wraps up several things that are fairly routine, but of course, if council desires, we can pull any of those out and move them to regular business. Minutes, ARP policies, and the budget amendment for the pay study implementation are included. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move the consent agenda be approved.
All right, Mr. Green with the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second for Mr. Thomas. All those in favor, cast your votes. All right, the consent agenda is adopted. We have a couple special presentations this evening. Crystal Morphus is going to present on current economic development trends. Is that through, that's through the video presentation here?
Correct, sir. We've got her zoomed in here, so we're going
Okay.
to try and get it pulled up and get her going.
Crystal, can you hear us? Crystal, can you hear us? Crystal, you can go ahead. Crystal, are you there?
I know it.
Hey there. You're good to go.
I think your iPad's on mute for your audio is. to try it now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me, Noah?
I can.
Okay, I can't hear you. Okay, let me take these out and see. Yeah.
Let me work on my audio just a second. Well, if you can hear me, then I can go ahead and maybe you put some questions in the chat. Do you think that'll work?
That'll be good.
Okay, can your council see me on a screen somewhere too? Okay, good, good. Well, good. I am glad to be with everyone this evening. I'm Crystal Morphus with Creative Economic Development Consulting. And so just as a way of introduction, our firm does provide economic development services, consulting services across the Southeast. We have worked in Cleveland County over a number of years for your economic development partnership, also for some of your municipalities. So I'm quite familiar with Cleveland County. So the reason I'm coming to you this evening is our firm has a history of giving away consulting work. We give away one large consulting project every year called our Creative Give Back. We've done that for 8 years. But this year is our company's 10th year anniversary. And so we've been giving away 10 small projects throughout the year as well. And your staff member, Justin, entered our drawing for our Give Back projects this year and was drawn for this project, which is a presentation on some current trends in economic development. So just know that this is one of 10 smaller projects we've been giving away just to celebrate our company's 10 years in business. So I'm going to share my screen and share some. It says that I need to have my screen sharing enabled, Noah. If you'll do that, I'll share my screen and share some slides with everyone. Okay, there we go. Great. Here we go. I'm going to go ahead and start here from the beginning. Great. Just to share some economic development trends with you, and then I'll pause at the end and take any questions council may have. Hopefully I'll be able to hear, or at least Noah can put them in the chat for me. So the 4 big trends I'd like to share with you this evening have to do with labor. In economic development, we used to say that we follow the realtor's mantra of location, 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 but today our 3 L's are labor, labor, labor. I'll talk about the labor shortage, about how remote work is here to stay and how that's impacting communities of all sizes, and this boost we've had in entrepreneurship, how that's impacting communities like Bowling Springs and others as well, and then some of the mega projects that's been announced in the Carolinas and what that's going to do to shape business recruitment over the years. So first, about labor. We know that labor is the #1 concern of all companies, big, small, has been for a long time and will continue to be, and I'll share with you why.
This was good.
But this is a list of the corporate site location factors pulled from Area Development Magazine. They survey corporate executives every year on the most important factors that they consider when locating a facility. And you'll see that labor is above things like incentives. It's above things like transportation or highway accessibility. It's really at the top of the list, and it has been for a few years, and it will continue to be because of the labor shortage. So the reason that this labor shortage is going to continue for a really long time, barring another significant Great Recession, there's several factors that lead into it. So this is not a short-term issue with the labor force. The first is that we have just not been having enough babies in the United States. Replacement rate is 2.1 babies per woman. And you see we've been declining since really the 1960s, considerably falling off. And you'll see now we're at well below replacement rate. So replacement rate again is 2.1 babies, and we're well below that. During the pandemic, it dropped down to about 1.6. I think it's popped back up just a little bit. So we're just not having enough children. So if you have any millennial children in your family, encourage them to have more babies. It will help our labor force long term. So this is a long-term issue that's been coming, and it's not an easily solvable one. Even if we did start having more children in the United States, it's a long time before they enter the workforce. So this is one reason the labor shortage is going to continue for a long time. So that is really contributing to very slow population growth. In the last census, you'll see to the far right there, the dark red bar, the United States population grew at the slowest rate. It still grew, but at the slowest rate since we've been keeping the census. So again, if you don't have a lot of people coming into your workforce, you're going to have a workforce shortage. Something else that has contributed to it is a lot of the baby boomers decided during the pandemic that they had had enough. We usually have about you see roughly 2 million baby boomers retiring every year for the last several years, some a little more and some a little less, but about 2 million. But in 2020, we had 1 million more exit the workforce. And oftentimes, retirees will exit and then re-enter. We didn't see that during the COVID pandemic. They exited, and they haven't come back in the numbers yet. So, and I don't know that many of them will come back at this point. So we had a larger mass exodus of baby boomers that also contributed to it. So what we see is really population struggling across North Carolina in the last census. About 51 counties lost population. Those are the red areas. If you look, of course, at Cleveland County, you're in the green, so you do have some population growth, not as strong as the darker green areas in our state. But it is concerning, again, this labor shortage and how about half of the communities in North Carolina have been losing population. Similarly, about half of our municipalities lost population as well. Again, you're not in this boat of a declining population, but not one of our fastest growing in terms of population. But again, this is a longer term issue of the labor shortage is a longer term issue, not a short. So what does it mean? It means that communities that can attract workers will be those that will win in economic development. And I put the slide up here of Charlotte's Backyard, which you're very familiar with. It is has received lots of awards across our national awards for this talent attraction campaign. It's actually quite smart to take advantage of the Charlotte brand. Cleveland County could invest millions of dollars over a decade and still not receive the brand recognition of Charlotte. And when people say that they're moving to Charlotte, they really mean they're moving to the region. So Cleveland County is really tapping into those, I think it's 60 or so people a day that are moving to the region that want some of those amenities but would love to live in a place like Boiling Springs. So this talent attraction spending is a trend we are seeing in economic development. Also, place-based strategies to attract talented workers. I put in those green bubbles things that I read in your strategic plan that Boiling Springs is doing that matches up with place-based strategies. So communities are investing in amenities, and I know that you have on your agenda things like trails and gathering places to create that sense of place. And we also use the term place attachment in economic development, making your place sticky so people stay. Communities are investing more in recreation and arts and cultural programs, activating their downtowns, so they're really contributing to that sense of place. I know that I read that you have a Parks Master Plan underway. Beautification, streetscape, those are all really important. But something that gives Boiling Springs an advantage in place-based strategies is your connection to lifelong learning in Gardner Webb. We find that not only retirees, but millennials and other people gravitate to communities that have higher education facilities for several reasons. It provides them with cultural arts. It provides them with lifelong learning. It provides them with many types of amenities. So your connection to Gardner Webb is definitely an advantage in place-based strategies. Another impact of this labor shortage is really since 2008, we have not had enough workers in the construction industry. As you all know, the housing market has been hot due to rising interest rates. It's cooling a little bit, but really there just were not enough houses built. You see the housing inventory declining for a number of years. The U.S. just in general across the country did not build enough housing stock. And again, that goes back to the 2008 recession where the construction industry crashed and many builders went out of business and just didn't return to the market. So this housing shortage, even though it's starting to slow, is something that's going to take us a long time to dig out of. So we see communities responding to this by really doing a lot of housing market studies and analysis so that they can share that with residential developers. They're starting to market their residential sites similar to how you would market business or industrial sites to try to connect with developers. And many communities are really working hard to support upper floor residential, even in smaller downtowns. Like Morganton, for example, the city of Morganton has had an active program with developers to create upper floor living in their downtown area. And I've noticed that in Bowling Springs, you're working to expand infrastructure to neighborhoods, which would encourage residential development, and also to have a town planner on staff, which would help with housing and really answer questions and make some connections with developers as well. So another trend is remote work and how that relates to entrepreneurship. It is here to stay, even though people are returning to the office. They don't want to go back to the office full time. Several studies over the last few years have shown that people would love to, they still prefer to work from home anywhere from 1 to 4 days. Most people don't want to work from home all the time, but they don't want to be in the office all the time either. So we see these hybrid models. So remote work is definitely here to stay in some form. At the same time, we're seeing this huge surge in entrepreneurship. If you had asked me in March of 2020 if it would be a record year for new business starts, I would have said, no way, the economy's too uncertain. But we've actually had record new business starts in 2020, 2021, and 2022 is really off to a great start too. So this is the U.S. chart you can see across the board, but this is North Carolina, and you can see how the new business starts really soared in 2020 and 2021. And North Carolina this year was ranked second for small business growth. So we see a lot of people working from home, they're starting new businesses, and because of that, we're seeing communities respond with new spaces for solo entrepreneurs and startup businesses. A couple of examples, CoSquare is a co-working facility in Yanceyville in Caswell County, a very rural place. The images in the top right slide are from CoSquare. It's a really attractive place to work. Workspace is a co-working facility that's actually sponsored by the town of Lewisburg, another smaller community. They're in the greater Raleigh area, similar to Bowling Springs being in the greater Charlotte region. CoSquare is a project of Caswell County. Workspace is a project of the town of Lewisburg. And then I also put on here your Advanced Technology Center that's being developed. Because in addition to co-working spaces, we see maker spaces and accelerators and other forms of entrepreneurship space really taking off in again, communities very small and rural like Yanceyville, and of course, larger communities. And I put this green bubble to the left that I know in your strategic plan, one of your priorities is identifying land for small commercial use and small business use. And that's right in line with some of the best practices that we're seeing. So one exciting thing that's been happening in economic development are these huge mega projects that have been located in the Carolinas. I've been working in economic development more than 25 years, and this slew of multi-billion-dollar projects is something we have never seen before, and it just keeps coming. So there's lots of opportunity in that. Well, I'm missing a slide, so I'll just talk through it. The mega projects that have been announced in North Carolina, there's the Toyota electric battery facility, which is in Randolph County and the edge of Guilford County in the Triad region. There's the VinFast, which is electric vehicle manufacturer in Chatham County. And then close to you as well across the border, BMW's announced a new electric battery facility that's expanding in their BMW locations in the Spartanburg area. In addition to those, it's not electric vehicles, but in the technology field, Wolfspeed has announced a multi-billion-dollar project in Chatham County for chips, of technology chips. So these mega projects, especially electric vehicles, are going to have a lot of impact on manufacturing and the supply chain across the Carolinas and even wider. So there's tremendous opportunity for Cleveland County and for Bowling Springs, because you're right in that corridor where BMW up to Toyota and over to VinFast, that whole automotive corridor is going to see just a slew of suppliers and related projects to electric vehicles and electric batteries. And it's just going to present more opportunity than we can really imagine, because the industry is just developing in the United States now. So that's going to be a significant trend for us to follow. So I'll wrap up those 4 trends. The labor shortage is going to continue for the foreseeable future. Automation will lighten that or ease that up a little bit, but not fast enough. So we're going to continue to see a labor crunch and companies responding to that. We're going to continue to see people working from home and people starting new businesses, and that's going to make startup space and small space and co-work space even more important, especially in communities like yours that have a lot of people that maybe go to Charlotte or to the region to work 1 or 2 days a week, but then work from home other days of the week. And then the other trend of these mega projects are going to create opportunities in the supply chain of the electric vehicle industry in particular, particularly all across the Carolinas. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen. I'll be glad to answer questions, and maybe Noah can type them in the chat. I'll see if I can work on my volume too while he's doing that.
Any questions?
Okay. So are there any questions?
I don't think so. Thank you for the presentation. A lot of valuable information.
No questions, everybody's good.
There were no questions, Noah? Okay. Well, good. If you think of any later, I'll be glad to follow up with you. Again, I appreciate the opportunity to share some of this information with you. I hope it's helpful to the town as you continue to work on your strategic plan, as you continue to work on economic development initiatives in Bowling Springs, and also as you continue to work with your partners at Cleveland County and in the Charlotte region to advance economic development. So good. I wish I could be there in person, but I'm glad to have Zoomed in with you for a little while and look forward to seeing you in person at some point.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Root.
Well, I couldn't have asked for a better tee-up than that. That was perfect. Yeah, so she's talked, big picture labor trends in the state, and I'm going to break it down to Cleveland County. But first, before I get too far into that, I am going to put a plug in as a veteran and as a member of the Veterans Advisory Council for Cleveland County. We are planning on having a parade and a ceremony this Friday in celebration of Veterans Day, so just would encourage everyone to come out and support the veterans in Cleveland County. A stat that's not covered in my presentation, but it's a stat that I have memorized, is that Cleveland County is home to an above-average number of veterans. And Crystal's great, though. Crystal has helped us develop the Cleveland County Economic Development Strategic Plan, and there's just one thing that she kind of missed for Cleveland County in the EV market, and that's that we are, of course, home to one of the largest lithium deposits in the world. So we expect that to really kind of spur a lot of growth in that EV as we target the EV supply chain and the battery manufacturing and the chip manufacturing and all the great things that are produced with lithium. So that being said, I'm going to break down Cleveland County's labor. So just a quick kind of note about this data. This data is mostly gathered from systems that CCEDP is subscribed to and pays a lot of money for, data systems such as JobsEQ, EMSI, and then there is some data pulled from FRED, the Federal Reserve Economic Data. So this is not data that I've made up. I've collected it, and we've kind of really crunched the numbers and tried to compare it to what we see in real life. And so kind of my background before economic development is workforce development. So I spent the better part of a decade trying to understand these labor trends and make sure we're staying ahead of it and develop the workforce in a manner that meets our local industry. So this is something that I'm pretty passionate about and know a fair amount about. So and this presentation has been pretty organic. I've given it a lot of times, and every time I give it, someone asks me a question that I don't quite know the answer to, and then I add a slide. So this originally was like a 10-minute presentation, and now it's more like a 15-minute presentation. So with that being said, we can take a look here at the history of Cleveland County. I probably don't have to tell anyone here that we, of course, were a rich textile, the whole southeast, western North Carolina in particular, textile furniture manufacturer. Cleveland County was more heavy in textiles. And we all know what happened when textiles started to leave in 2000s. You can see in December 1994, we had the lowest unemployment rate in our history, 3.4%. Textiles were good, everything was good, they were booming. And then we saw globalization and a variety of other factors that drove those businesses overseas and kind of lost a lot of those jobs. And then on top of that, as those businesses were closing in the late 90s, early 2000s, 2008 happened, which was the Great Recession, and then we hit the highest unemployment rate that we've ever seen, 17%. And then, of course, you can see it's always pretty cool to see March 2009 we hit that 17% number, and then Clearwater Paper moved to town in 2010, and you can kind of see right there on that 2010 slope, it just goes down from there. Clearwater Paper, you can always track Clearwater Paper as the catalyst that really kind of turned the economy around in Cleveland County and allowed for other growth. And then May 2020, just kind of need to point out 14.1% unemployment, COVID, right? And that, I always call that an artificial recession, right? Because it wasn't driven by, and I didn't come up with that term. An economist came up with that term. I just stole it. But so it was not driven by market demand, supply and demand. It was driven by an act of God, if you will. So it was kind of like an artificial recession. And if you look at Western North Carolina compared to our eastern counterparts, we were heavily manufacturing based. Again, referencing Clearwater Paper, toilet paper was was in high demand during COVID. So we were hiring more people where the east coast of North Carolina was laying workers off in the masses because it's heavily tourism based, right? So Cleveland County did comparatively okay still during COVID because, again, we had that high manufacturing base. And so then we'll take a look at the current workforce. So Cleveland County hit a record number. We broke 100,000 people in population. Crystal talked about how our population, we were green, we were one of the growing counties, so we finally broke 100,000 folks in the county. And so this is kind of where we start to get the different workforce terms, right? You start hearing about the unemployment rate. Well, what does that really mean, you know? Because I think we can all kind of look around and know that if you say 96% of the people are working in Cleveland County, that doesn't sound exactly right, you know. So what does that 4% number really mean? And, you know, so you can kind of see here, the first definition is the 16 plus non-civilian, 16 plus civilian non-institutionalized population is 81,000. So what that means is that they are over the age of 16, right? So generally folks over the age of 16 are eligible to go to work. You know, you don't want 5-year-olds going to work in a manufacturing facility, so you don't generally count them as part of your eligible workforce. So you kind of cut those down right out the gate. Civilian, meaning they're not in the military. A military person can have their home or record listed as Cleveland County, but they could be overseas serving our country, so they're not actively contributing to our workforce, so we don't count them in the labor demographic, even though they technically reside in Cleveland County. And then non-institutionalized population. So that means they're not incarcerated or in a 24-hour care facility, right? So if they have a severe disability or they're in hospice or something, right, they can't work because they're institutionalized. So after you get rid of all those kind of folks, you're left with this 81,000 number. And so we'll break that down a little further on the next slide. And so now that we've whittled it down to that 81,000 number, well, who's working and who's not working? How do they calculate the numbers that they calculate? And so you can see, you look at it here, 81,000, and then you go to how many folks are actually employed is 46,000. Now that's a pretty major drop. So there's 81,000 people that are eligible to work, and then there's 46,000 folks actually working, and then you only have 2,000 people that are looking for work. So the unemployment number is a reflection of that 2,000 out of that total 48,000 folks. So to be considered unemployed, you have to have actively sought for work in the last 4 weeks. And if you're not employed and you've actively sought for work in the last 4 weeks, then you're considered unemployed, right? And so that take the number of folks unemployed, combine it with the people that are employed, and that gives you your total labor force of 48,000, right? And so then you look, well, who is this 32,425 folks that aren't working and that aren't looking for work, right? So they're not counted in that unemployment figure. So who are these folks and what are they doing? So, and just kind of, you know, you start talking about the 4% unemployment rate and stuff. So Cleveland County, the 4.4 is just a little dated. It's actually about 4% now, and we compare fairly well compared to the nation and the U.S. So the NC is at 3.5%. The U.S. is also about 3.5%. So we comparatively are doing all right. There's a time that most economists consider 5% unemployment full employment. Everyone who wants to work is at work at 5%, and those days are long gone. We've been at below 5% for a long time. And then you could look at the labor force participation rate, right? So that is the total number of people that are working. That's typically a more accurate number, right? So you look at that labor force, the 48,000, and out of the 81,000 people that are eligible to work, 48,000 are trying to work or are working. And so that's where you get that 60% labor force participation rate, which sounds kind of negative. You know, it sounds like only 60% of the population is working, but again, compared to NC and the U.S., we're stacking up pretty similarly. So, but who are these 32,000 folks that are not in the labor force? Who are they? What are they doing? So I present to you a couple of key considerations. So the first one we'll take a look at, if I'm not mistaken, are disabled folks and caretakers. We'll talk about the hidden labor market a little bit, and retirees and stay-at-home parents. So these are folks that maybe have additional barriers to go to work, and that's why they're not working, right? So let's go to the next slide. So the first one we'll talk about are the disabled population. So you can see here in Cleveland County, there are a total of 7,000 folks who are disabled. And somebody told me, well, it's not fair to count disabled folks in the workforce population if they can't work because they're disabled, right? Well, if they're not in a 24-hour care facility, they are still counted in that workforce demographic. And you can see that about almost 3,000 of them are working. So you can find accommodations and other alternatives for folks that are working. Even if someone's severely disabled, they may can answer a phone and work in a call center, right, or work from home. So there's a lot of opportunities to move these folks into the workforce, but they are counted in that workforce demographic. So we'll go to the next slide. And this one's a little bit more abstract, the hidden labor market or gray workforce. There's not a true definition for it, but it's something that those of us who work in workforce development have talked about in those circles and at these conferences and things, is the gray labor market. Essentially, these folks are potentially working, right? They're handymen, they're maybe doing illicit things to earn money. Maybe they're essentially not reporting their income on their taxes, and they're therefore missing all the Bureau of Labor Statistics data catching, right? And somebody asked me, well, do you have any idea of how many folks there are? And I said, well, no, because if we knew how many there were, we would know who they are, and we'd make them pay their taxes. So, again, it's completely theoretical, but it's something to consider. And, you could probably think so some folks that probably do some sort of odd jobs, and are they paying taxes? So they may not be considered. But they are earning income, and they're technically working, but they're not counted in the workforce. So we'll go to the next one. Retirees. This is Cleveland County's probably biggest problem right here. We have, if you just take a look at the...
He called me a problem.
No.
I wish I was a problem.
So you just take a look at it right here. Folks over the age of 65 years old, there's 19,000 of them in Cleveland County, and that's above average for a county of our size, right? So, and that doesn't mean folks that are over 65 are retired, but again, I don't know the exact number of how many folks are retired, and people usually say that 32,000 folks, right, they'll say, well, that's the lazy people who don't want to work, but in reality, you look at that 19,000 number, a lot of them aren't lazy, they're just retired. I would never call my granddad after he worked for 40 years at Carolina Freight would have slapped me if I said he was lazy. He's just retired. He's enjoying his time at home. So, but that is a key consideration for Cleveland County and our labor force. So we'll take a look at the next one, and I think this is some of the lowest hanging fruit are the stay-at-home parents in the county, right? So you just take a kind of a look here. There's 12,000 children within range of daycare needs, right? And that doesn't equate to 12,000 folks staying at home, right? Because two-parent households, and then we've established that there's a potentially higher number of retirees and grandparents often watch children, but there probably is a correlation to that number and the folks who are not going to work, right? So folks who, especially if you start looking at lower income positions, right? Retail, fast food, restaurants, those sorts of things, it quickly becomes cost prohibitive to pay for childcare. You can see that that's actually the average annual cost for childcare in Cleveland County, that chart over there. So you can just see it. Just say that a stay-at-home mother decided she wanted to go to work. I'm going to work part-time while my child's in daycare. I'm going to work 20 hours a week, and she goes and finds herself a $12 an hour job, 52 weeks a year, which is, assuming she works every week of the year. You can see it quickly becomes cost prohibitive for her to do that. So she would just stay home. And especially if you start looking at the upper end of the county where you got to factor in gas prices, right? It quickly becomes cost prohibitive for those people to go to work. And so again, they're not lazy. They just have this barrier to employment. So we'll look at this one. And Crystal already teed this one up, so I won't spend a lot of time on it. But there has been a declining birth rate in the U.S. since the 70s. And I'll point out that she said that millennials should have more children. But once again, started in the 70s. So not just our fault here, but it is a key factor in why there's this workforce crunch now, because there are less people than there were working, and as she said, boomers continue to retire, then the workforce will continue to go down. And this sounds scary, but it's not quite as scary as it seems, because if you look at Europe, they've had a declining birth rate for much longer than we have, and it's much lower. That's why U.S. still is an attractive market for new companies wanting to move here, because even though our birth rate is low and declining, it's not as bad as Europe's. So, and then again, other age risks. This compares Cleveland County to other counties our size across the whole U.S. You can see that we have a below average number of millennials. And if you think again back to when were millennials graduating high school, it was during the Great Recession, where we were economically depressed, had 17% unemployment, and there weren't a whole lot of great opportunities here. And so those folks, after they graduated high school, left the county in pursuit of better careers for them and their family. And so as a result, we now have less than we should have. Even for a county of our size, we have less of that millennial demographic. And then again, we have an above average number of retirees for this community. We have an above average number of folks for counties our size, for folks that are potentially eligible to retire. So then we'll take a look at it. I don't like to end my presentations on negative notes. That sounds scary. Start talking about all that stuff. So I like to talk about some of the positive things that could potentially happen. So the commuting pattern, right? So this is something that we always consider low-hanging fruit. So currently, about 14,000 folks drive into Cleveland County every day to go to work, and about 21,000 folks leave the county every day to go to work, which means we lose negative 6,000 folks every day to commuting. And so that sounds also negative, but really that's kind of a positive, because that means if we can convince those 6,000 people that are already living in our community to just find a job and work here, then that's low-hanging fruit. We can bring those people back here and increase our workforce by almost 6,000 people, locally. And one of my favorite stories to tell is we had a job fair for Greenheck, and we had a fellow who was working at BMW, and Greenheck had similar salary, similar benefits, better working hours, and he didn't have to drive 45 minutes to work. So he said he went to the job fair and he took the job with Greenheck. So we retained that person, and if we can just sell the folks in our community that there are these good jobs here now, we can pull some of those folks that are driving those long distances back into work. And so I always get asked where are they leaving to and from? So most of our folks are coming from Rutherford, Gaston, and Mecklenburg County. That's where the majority of them are driving in from. And then the rest of them are driving out. They're driving out mostly, go to the next slide. They're driving mostly out to Gaston and Mecklenburg County. So that's where we lose the majority of folks to. And then the last thing, as Crystal once again mentioned, we have had a positive population growth. So that's not only births, but more due to probably migration. So we've had more people moving into Cleveland County than we've had moving out. So you can see just last year we had about 4,500 folks move into the county. We lost about 3,500 folks, so we had a net positive 929 migrations into Cleveland County. So our population grew as folks are realizing that the cost of living's lower here. You can have the same wages, and you can have all the amenities of being in Charlotte's backyard and being able to take a day trip to Charlotte or Asheville, but still have the low cost of living of being in Cleveland County. So And then, once again, people always ask, where are they moving from and to? We lose most and gain most from Gaston County. We swap with them the most. And we also, Mecklenburg and Rutherford County are also where we lose and gain the majority of population from. So our neighbors, essentially. And that's it. Any questions?
Thank you,
All
Mr.
right.
Root.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Good job, good data.
Mr. Evans, Gardner Webb.
Good evening, everyone. Happy to report we're on the heels of one of our most successful homecoming tradition or homecoming events in a long time. I think it was refreshing for our campus and the community to see the number of folks coming in. Just at some of our different anecdotal events around campus, we had more people attending those. It actually saw double the number of last year, and then of course much bigger than the COVID year. So we're excited for that. Some things coming up. Groundbreaking for the amphitheater. Every one of you should get an invitation in the mail. November 30th will be breaking ground. We actually had a student the other day said, why do they call it groundbreaking? The ground's already broken. So we'll do the ceremonial part on November 30th for that. Founders Day, December 1st, we're bringing that back. That's been dormant for, we have no clue how long. We went back and found 1974 was one of the last ones we found. And that's just going all the way back, celebrating the inception of Gardner Webb. We'll have a convocation that morning. We're actually placing a plaque at the, I believe it was the Huggins Curtis building, the original location, first building on campus, to memorialize that. A dinner that night followed by Festival of Lights, which I believe everyone's familiar with. So I want to invite the community out to participate in that. A couple other opportunities to participate on November 11th. No competition, but we're also hosting a Veterans Day event. No parade for us, but if you can't get to Shelby, we'll have something local here. And then on the 19th, everybody can participate in this. We have our military appreciation football game against A&T. We actually found out yesterday we'll have a sponsor, so we'll have anywhere between 250 and 300 tickets for active duty and veterans to attend. Would love to connect with you on that afterwards. And in addition, we found out that will be for the conference championship, which is the first time in a very long time. No matter how this weekend goes, they play Campbell. No matter how that goes, this game on the 19th will be a conference championship. So really exciting. A&T's bringing their band. Come to hear that, but come to watch Gardner Webb win is the hope. Webstock, April 22nd. We've set the date there. I think the bands are TBD at this point. And then the last thing I have, I think you guys have talked about master plans several times. We have put an RFP out for our master planning process as well. So any questions for me? If not, I'm going to go do my civic duty before they close.
It was good to meet several students at the last Music on Main. I got a chance to meet a lot of them and as well being involved in homecoming.
Thanks for being in the parade. That was great.
Thank you for that invitation, but I met some people that I graduated with back in 2001, a long time ago.
Awesome. And
But,
last thing I have, if you have any more extra credit, I'm your guy.
Right, yeah.
I'm your guy.
Gotcha.
Yes, sir.
I've looked around the room. I'm sure I'm the only person in the room who actually remembers the Huggins Church.
Well, come on out. Make sure we put the marker in the right spot. We know the general area, but
The story I always tell was when I was in elementary school, got up one morning, looked out the window, big fire. I thought, oh
it
boy,
wasn't the
school's
Hardee's,
burning
was
down.
it? It wasn't the Hardee's
Actually,
building.
the Huggins Curtis building.
Well, come help us
remember
make sure
that.
we put it in the right spot. So, thank you, everybody.
All right, on to regular business. Hopefully, council has had a chance to review the potential revisions to Chapter 92, dealing with animals and livestock and chickens, et cetera. Mr. Longino, I'll let you brief.
Thank you, sir. I know we've talked about this before, so I'll still give a just a brief overview and then kind of recap where we sort of ended up. So we reviewed several ordinances from towns across the state regarding animals, livestock, chickens, etc. Then of course we sought feedback from the planning board and town council. We sort of took this through the process for some feedback initially, and then have brought it back through with the final version here. So the feedback that we received was that the ordinance needed to be more restrictive and include more enforceability. Currently, the town contracts with Cleveland County Animal Services for animal control services. It's been a long-standing partnership, and the town doesn't wish to take on that responsibility from the county. However, we do recognize the need to be able to have some control over situations in town and not solely rely on another agency that sometimes takes some time to get here and may have other things on their plate. So we want to be able to do some things in town quickly and efficiently, but then also have the ability to use animal services as needed for those bigger cases as well. So in the same vein as that, Cleveland County Animal Services recently overhauled its animal ordinance. The Boiling Springs chapter, when we started looking into this, had a lot of language from that old ordinance in there. It basically said we hereby adopt the Cleveland County ordinance, but then it also had definitions and wording that just mirrored that old ordinance. So we have a red line copy and then a clean copy in your packets of what that used to look like, and we really just tried to take all of that out, put in a paragraph that says we hereby adopt the Cleveland County ordinance on animals, and give them the authority to, we have an interlocal agreement for them to have the authority to enforce that. But then we also added a section, it's 92.04 on the restraint and keeping of animals, and that would apply to what we can do locally. And the enforcement section of that sort of mirrors the Cleveland County ordinance as well. They have the ability to, confiscate an animal and impound it, basically. We obviously don't have the facilities for that, so instead of having that in there, we just had an increasing fine that we also can add restraint measures of the offending animal to the ordinance. So we started to look through that and realized that we needed to update Chapter 92 as a whole, even though this conversation started for a more specific discussion. And then we started looking at the other ordinances, and some were very long and included every possibility that we could have for every type of animal that we might could have. And being that we haven't had sort of widespread issues with animals throughout town, we wanted to keep it not broader, but we wanted to keep it where it wasn't a list of animal after animal of what you had to do for each one. So we wanted to make it broad enough where it could apply to any animal, but narrow enough where we were able to enforce it if there was a problem with noise or smell or sanitation or anything like that. So 92.04 in your packets is that section. I'll go through it briefly. It talks about animals disturbing the rights or safety of others, the keeping of any animal which causes loud noises or disturbs a quiet or would be considered noisy to a reasonable person. No animals shall be kept in an area that or shall not be allowed outside of the control of its owner. Needs to be kept on a leash or similar devices, basically what that says. Not allowing an animal to damage the property of another, maintaining animals in a sanitary environment, and then the keeping, possession, or harboring of or feeding of wild animals that then cause issues from that. So we felt like that was broad enough to encompass any situation that would happen in town without having to get into the specifics of every situation. And just one other note along those lines, I did have a question about if someone decides that they want to put a cow, in somebody's backyard. I started to look into that, and one of the first things I found was, you Google, I want to put a cow in my backyard. But you get all these sort of like basic minimum requirements. So if somebody is going to do something like that, one of the first things they're going to find out is that there's a calculation that you should do to figure out how much acreage you'll need per animal, basically. So it seemed reasonable that if someone was going to do that, they weren't just going to on a whim buy an animal and put it in their backyard. And even if they did, we would still have the restrictions in here about it creating loud noises or being a sanitary issue or things like that. So I think we're covering 99.9% of the cases, and that's kind of how we got to where we're at.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Longino. Questions or comments from council?
I was hoping to have something that had tighter control, because I liked the way we were going in the first direction, the original direction. But then after considering that and all of the possibilities, I think this may be a better option or a better place to start and then see if it needs to be modified later.
So if we were to pass this tonight, does it fix the current problems in Homestead, or is it something that those things are grandfathered in or not?
No, sir. They would. This would address those issues.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And would
To their satisfaction?
I would hope so, but I'm not sure. I know
I know
there's,
one of those gentlemen that's on the planning board.
Yeah, I know there's, well, we did get positive feedback from the planning board on this. I know that the particular, area in Homestead, there's been a fence that's also been put up by the property owner, so I think that has probably addressed it from one angle, but this would certainly address it, from the others.
Was that fence erected by the property owner of where the situation was, or the adjoining property owner?
The adjoining property owner.
So that cost to him, he had to erect a fence. It kind of sticks a little bit.
Yeah.
I understand.
And if we, voted for this tonight, is this something that if something else comes up that we hadn't thought about, is it something that we can change? Do you have to
Absolutely.
wait a certain period of time, or?
No, we could change it, and this took probably at least 2 or 3 months, I think, to take it through that process twice. I think because we've already gone through that we could even more quickly, make a revision to it.
Okay, thank you.
I know there's a lot of time and effort went into it, and I do think it's a step in the right direction. And then, like I say, I think we should adopt it and go from there. So I make a motion that we
All right.
adopt the ordinance.
Mr. Green has made the motion to adopt the ordinance amending Chapter 92 as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Ms. Gant. Let your votes be known by using the electronic device.
I'll never get used to this. Former Mayor Ellis, you would love this.
All right, I wasn't watching the screen, but I guess everybody voted
They
green.
did, they did.
My fault on that. I was moved on already to the discussion items. The bike scooter rental program, I like the word micro-mobility. Opportunities to increase mobility with students on campus in particular. Justin, you want to speak some more?
Sure. Yeah, I can give a summary of that. So, just looking for some feedback on this. The idea really stemmed from wanting to try and connect the Broad River Greenway to us a little bit more. We have that great bike lane that was put in a few years back, but I don't think it gets utilized as much as it could. So I went to the Town and Gown conference this past year, and there was a representative from Bird Micro Mobility there, and I learned a little bit more about the bike and scooter rental program that they have, and you're probably familiar with them if you've gone to a larger city and you've seen the scooters that you can rent or the bikes that you can rent. So talk to them about what it would take to get it here in Boiling Springs, and how we could tie in Gardner Webb and the Broad River Greenway as well. Reached out to Gardner Webb, and they wanted to gauge the interest of some of the students. I met with some representatives from the Student Government Association, and they seem interested in it. So I wanted to come back to you all to see what the interest might be. The shared concern that the Student Government Association and I have is the basically the aesthetic of the scooters and bikes. I don't want them to be laying across the sidewalk or in the streets or anything like that and clutter things up. So that's something that through the agreement that we can have some control over in terms of the number of devices, and then also the termination of the contract if we don't like it. So again, really just wanted threw a lot of information at you about the program, but just wanted kind of some feedback on whether you wanted to explore it more or whether that was something that was maybe too much for Boiling Springs.
I read through the whole packet, but I'm still curious about what kind of liability we would, or would we have any liability? And I'm talking just about, not something wrong with the scooter being defective. What if somebody just fell off and done some serious damage?
Yeah. There's liability insurance that the company carries that I pretty sure they add us on to. And then as you go through the rental agreement on your device for the vehicle, you have to agree to all their terms and conditions, and that's where all that liability legal talk is sort of spelled out. So
So we're kind of out of any kind of liability?
Yes, ma'am, yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank
Key
you.
word there was kinda, right?
What's that?
Key word there was kinda out.
No, I think you'd probably be pretty, I don't think I wouldn't be concerned about the exposure
Okay.
liability wise. You know,
And I would assume that we would have a similar type map, some areas that we would not want those things used in.
yes, sir.
I mean, because if golf carts aren't approved for those areas, we wouldn't want these e-birds or the scooters
Yeah.
approved for those areas.
Absolutely. We would go through and actually craft an ordinance for you all to adopt that would put some regulations in place. And neatly enough, the company is able to track the devices through GPS, so you can set an area, and if a device goes outside of that area, it just shuts down. So they have to turn around and come back in. So kind of neat.
Also, I think I saw where I've heard where like if somebody is, like if I rent one and I leave it laying on the street 2 or 3 times, that they can just, I can't get one next time.
Correct. Yeah. If you throw it in the woods, then you'll get
Yeah.
charged for it, or you get banned from it. Mhm.
How close is the company that services those and, makes sure they are being picked up in those situations?
Their closest contract that I know of is in Gastonia.
Okay, so
They've been
if-
in there about a year or so, I think, and have been pretty successful. And
Because I've seen this implemented in Indianapolis, Indiana, and some of the complaints I heard was, I rented this, but the scooter did not have enough battery to take me where I was, and I had to leave it in the middle of the sidewalk. And then who comes and gets it? It's not necessarily the customer's fault, right? So, just being in a smaller rural area, I want to make sure that we have that readily. They come through once a week and pick things up. Right?
Sure, yeah.
We also have less volume, so.
Yeah, absolutely. But they are supposed to monitor those battery levels and come through and reorient the vehicle. So if all the scooters fall over, they're supposed to come through and stand them all up and keep them out of the flow of traffic on the sidewalk and everything.
Okay.
So, something you mentioned, like the Greenway. Would one of these scooters make it to the Greenway and back?
Mm-hmm. They would. I can't recall the range off the top of my head, but I remember asking that it was 2 miles or whatever it is down there.
Could there be a charging station down there so they could use it around the Greenway?
That would
On the trails?
we would envision a station sort of near the Greenway office up here downtown, and then a station down there. So I'm not sure if the batteries are interchangeable, or if you
I see.
leave one and take another one, or how that works. But I'm almost positive he said that there was enough range to get there and back.
This seems more like a opportunity for a business to come in and they're asking our permission. It's not necessarily they're asking us to just financially support it.
Correct. They're asking for permission to come here, and we actually would receive very small amount of compensation off of it. So every ride is 10 cents or so. I did the numbers off of the Gastonia rides, and it would be like a few $100 per year. We could put that toward sidewalk improvements or something that would be related to this.
And Gardner Webb gentleman left. If Gardner Webb is on board, interested.
They're interested, yes. So I reached out to them. They sort of kicked it to the students. The students said they were interested. So now, if you all are interested, then I would go and talk to their attorney and dean of students and work out some of the details and come back with an ordinance and a draft agreement.
And did I read these are not to be ridden on the sidewalk?
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's what my biggest concern is. I mean, I know we have the bike lane going towards the river,
Yeah.
and there's plenty of room.
Mhm.
But in other areas, especially when you get in the middle of town at the stoplight,
Yeah.
at busy times, it's gonna be tough to get a scooter through there.
Being in Gaston most days, I see a lot of these used in that, really what's their Main Street corridor down near the baseball facility and all that. I don't generally see those out on Franklin Boulevard or other parts. It's confined to a relatively small space of downtown. And that's sort of what we're looking at is a half-mile radius, right?
Mhm.
Except for the Greenway.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
It might encourage some students that wouldn't normally take 5 minutes to walk over to Subway to go over to Subway and get some lunch. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it would be neat if you didn't have a car to
Yeah.
pick one up and go to Ingles, come back.
I guess myself, I'm interested in pursuing it, and I don't know that I'm 100%. I'm not against us moving forward.
Okay.
with-
Yes, and this would certainly come back before we would approve the agreement or approve the ordinance or anything like that. So we can dig into the details at that point, or between now and then.
So are you looking for a motion, or are you looking for just
Just looking for consensus.
Direction.
Yeah.
I think you got that.
I think it's worth exploring, yeah.
I think it's worth it.
Continuing exploring.
Yep.
All right.
All right, very good.
Thank you.
I think it's another plus for us between the community and the college.
Mhm.
I mean, if it's successful, it's something we can use in our development marketing.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you. Next item for discussion is a potential solicitor ordinance. A request was made at the October Town Council meeting to review the solicitor ordinance. We didn't really have a chance to discuss it as a group, but the staff has done some research and is looking for feedback. I'll let Mr. Longino fill in the rest.
That's a pretty good summary. We just pulled some ordinances from surrounding communities, just to have something to kind of compare it to. And there's kind of a spectrum. So I've given you a summary there on your first page in your packet. Currently, we allow solicitors, but they have to get a permit. And then a city like Shelby pretty much bans solicitors, but then allows a few exceptions for religious or nonprofit groups. And then Asheville doesn't have a general prohibition, but has more of a requirement to get a permit, and has some other specific language in there. So just kind of wanted some guidance if you all wanted us to explore this further, leave it as it is, or what you were maybe kind of looking for based off the request made last month.
But it's a lot of reading to go through all that and then also look at the other town ordinances. But I didn't see in ours, which was one concern, is making it unlawful to beg or solicit alms. I mean, you see us downtown Shelby or near Walmart or different places, people just standing out asking for money. I would like us to consider making that part of our ordinance, that we not allow that unless it's already in there. The other point I noted, and I believe this was in Shelby's ordinance, where it said it was be considered a misdemeanor if the person was soliciting and was asked to leave and they became aggressive and would not leave. So I thought that was a pretty good addition. You know, if someone comes up and solicits at your property, you have the right to ask that person to leave.
Yeah, and I agree with Mr. Litton on that, as far as being more restrictive on those items. But also worried about, you know, we have some really good police officers, but that's going to take enforcement. That's going to take them away from other duties and responsibilities. So, but I want to protect the citizens as well and give them an opportunity to. But it's really hard. I mean, you know, we have our signs that say Bowling Springs city limits, but when we dealt with this in Shelby, it was a never-ending. The people didn't know what neighborhood they were working in. They didn't really know what municipality they were, and they didn't know there was a permit process. So it really became very difficult to enforce, and then at times it was hard on the police force because we had other calls going on, and it really made it sort of a crazy thing to deal with. But I think it's something we need to look at and continue studying and come up with a good solution to protect everybody. I mean, how would someone know that they had to get a permit to go door to door and sell cleaning stuff?
Yeah, right now it's
When they came into Bowling Springs, North Carolina, right now tonight.
Yeah. typically somebody calls and complains, and a police officer
Get a
has to go out and
complaint,
tell
the
them to get a
police
permit.
will be pulled away from any other duty, but, I mean, rightly so, they need to go take care of the call.
Mhm.
But again, it just, it becomes a monster to try to figure out how to do the enforcement. That's all my concern.
Yeah.
Nathan, how often, I mean, is this a frequent, or is it just, one or two a quarter?
Yeah, maybe one or two, well, yeah.
Okay. I mean, I think it's important to have the rules in place for Nathan to be able to enforce them, right?
Oh, yeah.
But if it's not a whole lot, I mean, yes, to your point, we don't want to pull them away from other important things. But, 5, 6 a year, maybe 10 at most.
Yeah, not very many.
That's not very impactful to the rest of the year for them. Yeah, I understand what you're saying about, like, when you come into town, how do you know? Do you put a sign underneath the welcome to Bowling Springs that says solicitor's permit required or something like that?
Yeah,
You know what I mean? And then you don't want people knocking at Justin's door every day saying, I need a permit.
Yeah, exactly, so that's what I'm saying.
Or we don't want an image that says we're unwelcoming to.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so, I mean,
How do you advertise that?
I mean, I
That's a good
understand, and I'm sensitive to the issue, but it's a difficult issue. And to me, I've lived in Homestead since 1992. It's not a huge problem. You know what I mean? There's not somebody knocking on my door every day. And I think some of those people who knock on my door, I would be opposed to us saying they can't knock.
Yeah, like these non-charitables, like
Yeah,
Boy
like
Scouts
the
and
football
churches
team
and football
selling
team, right.
cards for the Boosters Club, or the next door neighbor selling, they don't do that anymore, candy for their school or something
Yeah.
like that. Or the Boy Scouts are fixing to go through the neighborhood and solicit food.
Mhm.
That drive's coming up in the next couple of weeks. But we need something to
I
protect
do.
this.
I think,
We do.
I think of like the solar panel people and roofers and those type of businesses typically know that, hey, I probably need to go check out the town's website and see if there's something on their homepage that says I need a permit.
And if they don't, then they probably are not somebody you want to be doing business with anyway.
Yeah, or AT&T.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, my only other thought from the enforcement side was if we put in harsher prohibitions that maybe that company or similar companies in that industry, word gets around that they shouldn't come here because every time they come here they get run off. So it could over time keep some of those sort of less desirable businesses out of town. But then we could strengthen it up where it just allows some of those exceptions that still require permits for the Boy Scouts or for the churches or things. So.
I mean, I don't even know if it requires permits for the non-charitables. I think it's just the ask would be come in and help broadcast through the community that, hey, Boy Scouts are coming around through the neighborhood next week. Just be aware.
Or are they allowed to put a flyer in our mailbox?
Not in the mailbox.
Not put
They
anything
can't
in
open
You
your
can't put anything
mailbox.
in the mailbox, they mail, in the U.S. Postal Service, but.
That's what I thought. I didn't know if maybe the Boy Scouts could put in something like, food
Well, they
drive
go
next
around,
week.
it won't, and then the soliciting part, they go around, they put a hanger on your doorknob,
Yeah.
and they come back the next week and actually pick up the food, so. And the reason I know that is because the food goes to our food bank at the Baptist Church, so.
Yeah.
I think the young lady's here again tonight that brought this up originally, and some of her concern was, did these people have IDs? What type of operation hours and all that stuff? And so, I just think the ordinance needs to be enforceable enough so that we do deal with those problem people and that we're sensitive. Was there anything else you wanted to add?
But I'm here to try to answer any of your questions if you have any.
Yeah, well, did I state that correctly? I mean, that was some of your concerns about they didn't have IDs and you didn't really know. They were coming at different times, could come in even in the evening hours and just approach the house. What were some of the other concerns?
That it's easier on the officers because then they don't have to grab a map and figure out exactly which part of the neighborhood has the van. So they can just know the entire place is covered, so then it's easier. and it's less irritating for residents, because sometimes they're just rude.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but yeah, just wanted to make sure your voice was heard again tonight. So.
Is this something council could review over the next month and take a look at these other ordinances and see if there are specific ways we could
Yeah, we'll,
recommend to tighten up or?
yeah, staff will dig in a little bit more too and see, see what some potential changes could be based off of the feedback tonight, and yeah, we can discuss it again in December.
Okay. Is that?
Yeah, I'd be interested in seeing some like top recommendations that, favorite items out of all these other locations, Gastonia, Asheville,
Yeah,
Shelby,
that sounds good.
Okay.
top picks out of those.
Yeah. Sounds good.
I had one other.
Go ahead.
One other item, Mr. Mayor. On section 114.02, B, item 2, $25 per push cart or mobile food unit per license. Now, the license applications are online now, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and that's new,
Yes.
correct? Okay. And then when you go down to item D, it says all licenses issued under this chapter shall expire 90 days after the date of issuance thereof. And that's something I had brought up a couple months ago, and I know we got busy with some bigger ticket items. But that 90 days is awful short for those food truck folks. I'd like us to look at making that at least 6 months. Most of them don't come back around within 90 days.
Gotcha. Yeah. All right, we'll add that to the list.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, moving on to staff reports. Mr. Longino?
Thank you, sir. Just a few things to run through here real quick. RFP responses are due Friday for our land use plan update. I think Mr. Edwards had to express interest in that one before. Maybe it was the AIA one, but if anybody else is interested, in reviewing those, just shoot me an email or grab me afterward, and I'll be glad to send those over to you. We'll have just a grading rubric for you to go through and kind of score each of those. We'll also be sending out an RFP probably in the next day or two for our system development fee study that we budgeted funds for this year. That's the study that NC Rural Water talked to us about adding a fee for when development occurs. So we'll have that, and probably won't be able to review that until sometime in December, and then have a recommendation for you at the January meeting. But just wanted to mention it. And we applied for another round of ARC funding this week. Wanted to have the economic development presentations here tonight, so we sort of stay on theme as we've been talking about retail buildings and those type things in town. The ARC grant that we applied for would be for a downtown strategy study. So the retail recruitment firm that I've been having some discussion with has a program where they come and look at your programs and ordinances and things specifically for downtown to try and make them more accommodating for businesses to locate here, but also put some things in place so that you have less vacant buildings and things standing still for longer. So really hoping to get that grant, and that'll kind of keep us on track with some more of those economic development trends. The Christmas parade is set for November 27th at 3 p.m. That's the Sunday after Thanksgiving. Registrations have been coming in more steadily this week, so if you haven't registered yet, get your registration in. That is also in our online system now, so you can send that in from the comfort of your own home. And Ms. Kim Green will be there as Grand Marshal, so we're looking forward to having her. The Christmas tree lighting will be on December 2nd. Time to be determined, but the Gardner Webb Festival of Lights will be the day before, and then the Christmas tree lighting on the 2nd. Let's see. I wanted to follow up and let you all know that Lance should be taking over the old Public Works truck as of tomorrow. He was very excited. He can't wait to get it. Big smile on his face. We are accepting applications for an equipment operator position in Public Works. We've already gotten 2 applications. We just posted it like yesterday or today. Thank you to Mr. Litton and anybody else that might have shared it. I know it got shared a few times, and we've already got 2 applications. So, and are moving forward there and hope to have a full public works staff here soon. The golf cart map is done. I know you all have a copy at your seats. We've got that up on the website, and we'll start sharing that to get the word out so that it's more easy for people to know where they can drive those. We're on track to have some options for discussion around the Old Town Hall in December. Grayson has been a big help with that, so we're moving forward to kind of have a few directions forward for you all to discuss. And last but certainly not least, I hope all of the other jurisdictions in the county are watching our meeting and they see the Cleveland Cup. It's right here, but the town of Boiling Springs brought home the Cleveland Cup last month at the annual Cleveland Cup 5K race. So just wanted to mention that, and that's all I've got, sir.
Thank you very much. Ms. Gant.
I just want to give Mr. Roop a special thanks for providing us with all that valuable information and statistics that you presented us with tonight. I really appreciate that.
Mr. Litton.
Let's also thank our visitors for coming out and providing that information. I'd also like to thank everyone that participated in music on Main, and we finally got a good weather day. And a lot of positive comments there, so thank you.
Mr. Edwards?
Justin and I met with the YMCA board representing the city council back right before, I think it was the week of Halloween, stands out. They reviewed their annual budget, and I believe the council received a copy of it in the email. And they're also planning their annual turkey trot 5K. I think it's Thanksgiving Day, right?
Correct. It is, yes.
So, yep, just announcements on their YMCA turkey trot. That's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Thomas.
Yeah, I was very appreciative of both the economic presentations tonight, and I'm very proud of the town and the work that we put into the streetscape. I mean, it's all coming together as a bigger picture item, if you guys don't see that. And I'm just so thankful for the staff and for the partnerships with Gardner Webb and then in the other parts of the community, business owners. I mean, it takes all of us to make this town a really great place, and the board as well. So thank you all. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Mr. Green.
Well, I was going to mention the Old Town Hall. You know, I think I would like to see us, you know, seriously, you know, because we talk about it and then it kind of falls away and then we talk about it again. I would like to see us try to come up with some concrete future plans for what we'd like to do there. So I'm glad that's on your calendar too. I was going to say to our mayor, got former Mayor Ellis here, and then prior to him we had Mayor Hamrick for quite a while, and I think I've shared this with you, but I was a little apprehensive. You know, you had some big shoes to fill there. I was a little apprehensive about how that was going to work, but I just wanted you to know that I'm very pleased for you to be our mayor and the way you represent us with the. I just makes me feel good when I see you reading to the kids at school, and so I want to commend you for your leadership and the way you've stepped into those shoes and filled them very well. So I just wanted to say that,
sir. Thank you.
And to the other council members, I think we have a good council, and I think a lot of good things going on. We've got a good staff, and I feel good. I feel good about being a member of the council, and like Marty said about the things we're doing, and so I feel good.
Thank you. As my friend Mayor Ellis used to say, it's the best small town in America. Thank you to the staff who make that happen. Nathan, Mike, I don't see Mike tonight, Rhonda, Noah, Justin, you guys are models of excellence and professionalism. I hope everyone gets a chance to interact with Grayson over the next several months. He is absolutely a treasure that we have found through this fellow program. He's really solid. I see the Clarks as well. I mean, local business is what we're trying to do. It's what Mr. Thomas was talking about with the bigger picture and creating that sense of community. And you guys are excellent at doing that. The partnerships with Gardner Webb. today's election day, and today is when we celebrate our representative government. And this council is a model of representative government. And you guys listen to the people, you're responsive, but you make tough decisions when you have to make tough decisions. It's an honor to sit here with you all. And finally, to my students who I know can sit this long and be quiet now. I didn't realize that was something that was possible. These two guys, they know what they believe. They like to needle their classmates and draw some responses from them, but they're learning why they believe it. And this is why we do this, for them and for their kids. We talked about it at the sewer meeting the other day. You know, we may not see the fruition of some of these things that we're working on during our time, maybe even during our lifetimes, but it's still work worth doing. And I appreciate you. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, everybody push green.
Have
a good night,
I've already got out.
everybody.
I've already got out.
Oh, yeah.
No word on the mixed beverage vote as of yet.
I thought you was fixing to lay that on.
I've been texting Helton.
thought
She
that
won't
was
let me
coming.
know. There must be a line. I bet there's a line waiting.
It's like
Mayor
the Powerball. There's a glitch in the
Mayor Ellis said they
system.
were lined out the door.
Are they?
Someone in
So
California
that's why she
won.
wanted to
That's what I heard.
Yeah,
Like-
1.9.
I was down there a little
I
while.
guess California is one of the few states that doesn't tax lottery.
That was my money.
Oh, really?
Believe it or not.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Man,
I would have put them on the
You're right
bottom
on
of the
about
list
that
and not tax
big
them.
picture. All those,
yeah. Yeah, you would think.
It's coming
Yep.
together.
Yep.